Central Station on 2.
Go ahead.
Yeah, just checking with you for if you're ready for the watch setup.
And Chris, you have a go.
Station, this is Houston. Are you ready for the event?
We're ready for the event.
ABC News, this is Mission Control Houston. Please call station for a voice check.
Station, this is ABC News. How do you hear me?
ABC News, the International Space Station has you loud and clear.
Excellent. Bob, Doug, first of all, how's it going in space?
It's going pretty well. We've just gone over our first week in space this trip and been very busy. We even got to work a little bit on Saturday fixing our treadmill. So all in all, it's been great. It's great to spend time with Chris. He's a great crewmate. And, of course, Bob and I are just trying to get our space legs, and hopefully we can contribute to the science. And we're doing a lot of transfer with the HTV vehicle up here, and then we're getting ready for some EVAs at the end of the month. So a lot going on right now.
You know, you both left Earth when so many protests were erupting across this country and around the world. I wonder what message, from your standpoint, from your viewpoint there in space, what message do you have for the people on Earth?
Well, I think from an astronaut's perspective, I think there's a long history of discussing the overview effect and the recognition that our planet is really one that we share and need to understand and work together to both take care of and to fully utilize and make space for everyone. And so I think the message for us is one of cooperation and understanding, much as the International Space Station has provided a place for many countries to cooperate and integrate and successfully accomplish science, accomplish the mission of human spaceflight. And so it's really just that message of understanding and cooperation and the success that that can bring. And hopefully we can be a small example and as we go forward.
So many people were moved by that launch. I got to tell you, I was there on the ground, and I started to cry. It was the first launch that I had seen in person. And for so many people, for so many children especially, this is their very first launch, even watching it on television. What message do you have for them? Do you hope to inspire them? Because so many kids, they grow up wanting to be astronauts just like you.
Certainly, I think that's one of the biggest things we can hope to offer society is inspiring children to jump into the science and technology field, engineering. It's just an incredible field, and to be able to just show the world what we are capable of if a team works together very hard and solves some fairly difficult things. And look what we got to see on Saturday, a beautiful launch of the Falcon 9 and Dragon vehicles.
I see that dinosaur floating around, so I wonder, what did your sons think when they saw that dinosaur for the first time in space?
I think both of our sons were just super excited to see the toy that they had selected go on the mission with us. I think they saw it on the launch pad. Of course, they knew to expect it because they had participated in picking it and then agreed on the name, sticking with the name that it originally came with. And so, and my son has requested to know where Trimmer is during my private conference over the weekend, just like he wanted to know where Doug was, where his friend Jack's daddy was. And so it's been pretty exciting for them just to see us fly in space. I think in both of our cases, our children were not old enough to really understand our history of flying on space shuttles. And my son wasn't even born during my last mission. And so to get this chance to share it with our children is really exciting. And I know from the connections that they have with classmates and otherwise they're just super excited as a kind of classrooms or grade schools that they're a part of to see us actually go into space and make that connection.
I wonder now that you've spent some days in space, what have you learned specifically about the private space flight, the idea of a private company managing space flight? What have you learned about that you can shed some light on?
Well, I don't know if I've learned anything other than, what our experiences with SpaceX was when SpaceX put their mind to a particular problem that we had in development of Dragon, the Crew Dragon. There was all hands on deck, and they worked very hard and very quickly to what I think both Bob and I were used to in the military as test pilots, and how that acquisition process works and that development process works. SpaceX did it quicker. And it was really neat to see the teams come together to develop solutions to the problems that we encountered as we worked our way through the full development of the Crew Dragon. And I think what you'll see is we probably got to the launch pad a little faster potentially than maybe a government organization would have done it. But what I think I would like to emphasize is just the public-private team that developed this together, and it was a combination of both sets of ideals and designs that got us to the launch pad when we did.
Is there anything that you learned specifically about the Crew Dragon that you didn't know before you flew out to space?
I think for both of us, one of the things that we commented on as we were executing the mission, launching into space, and then arriving here at the International Space Station was just how well the training and simulation environment the SpaceX team put together and the NASA team put together for us matched what our experience actually was in the vehicle. The one thing that was different is you just can't simulate is what it feels like to ride on a rocket into orbit. And so the vibrations, the coming alive of the engines, the coming to life of each stage as you sequence through the activities of loading and the first stage igniting and then the second stage igniting and continuing all the way into orbit. And then finally the small little engines that are around the vehicle that fire. I think we called it an interesting melody that it produces while we're actually executing a burn to get closer to the space station, and I'm sure when we depart it'd be very similar. And so all those noises and feelings and rumblings inside the rocket, you just couldn't simulate those, and now we have to figure out the best way to pass all that information on to the Crew 1 team that will be executing here in just a few short months.
I know your wives were watching there on the ground as your spaceship lifted off, and they are astronauts themselves. They are decorated astronauts themselves. What do you want to say to them right now? Because so many people have called you the Astro Couple, and I think a lot of people love that you're the Astro Couple. So what's your message to your wives down on the ground right now and your son?
Well, I think for us both, we just want to tell them thanks. We know that the job that they have right now is much more difficult than the job we have, and what we are doing up here keeps us pretty busy and is pretty difficult, but there's no comparison when you put a loved one on a rocket and launch them into space, who has the more difficult job. And then to carry on with the household while your spouse is gone for months, it's very akin to the military deployments and the spouses that see their loved ones go away to, the Far East or Middle East, Far East, wherever they're deployed, and they're gone for several months. It's very similar for our spouses. So they have to do all the things that we do normally at home, and just the emotional challenge of us launching on a rocket for the first time, and then spending several months in space.
Bob and Doug, thank you so much for joining us.
I would say is something as simple as I would just like to add, though, that probably the simple version is we love you and thank you for carrying the load to our spouses.
I love that. Thank you so much, Bob and Doug.
Station, this is Houston ACR. That concludes the ABC News portion of the event. Please stand by for a voice check from NBC News.
Station, this is NBC News Washington. Do you copy?
The International Space Station has you loud and clear.
Hey, Bob and Doug, it's Tom Costello with NBC News on the ground here and watching, and so glad to see you both doing so well in space. First of all, congratulations on a spectacular launch. I'm wondering, you're both veteran astronauts. You flew in the space shuttle. How did this rocket launch compare to your shuttle launch experiences?
That's a great question, Tom. It's good to talk to you. I think we both felt the big difference with this vehicle was the separation between the stages. So after first stage completed its work at about 2.5 minutes, we separated. The big difference there between Falcon 9 and shuttle was we came off solid rocket boosters in the second stage, which burned very rough on shuttle. It was a very rough ride for the first 2.5 minutes. With Falcon 9, it was a smoother ride, but then an immediate cutoff of the engines, and then we had to move on to the second stage, which we went 0G for perhaps a second, and then when the second stage engine ignited, then we started to feel G again. And then that particular ride was quite a bit rougher than the first stage. There was some vibration, which I assume is normal as we got all the way up into orbit, but a lot different than shuttle.
More like, do you think more like an Apollo or a Saturn mission experience?
I doubt it was quite like an Apollo type ride. That vehicle was so much bigger. I just think with Falcon 9, it's a smaller vehicle than shuttle and a much smaller vehicle than Saturn V. And I just think you feel the vehicle, if that makes sense. You feel the vehicle a little bit more. And I think that's why we felt that second stage quite a bit more. You just noticed everything almost without looking at the displays. You knew what the engines were doing, you knew what the vehicle was doing, and you could almost feel it. So it was a kind of a neat feeling.
Gentlemen, I have to ask you both, and I'm sorry because I know you've been asked before, but you are the only ones who have managed to escape all of the challenges right now on planet Earth, the pandemic, the economic situation, the unrest in the streets. And I'm wondering, from 270 miles above the Earth, your thoughts on what's happening on the ground where we are.
Yes, it's a really interesting position to be in with the challenges that the world faces on the ground, from the pandemic to the unrest and challenges inside the United States. And I referred to it a few times in the past as is another example of the overview effect that we have the opportunity to have the experiences of when we're in low Earth orbit, to look back at the Earth and see that it is just one place. And in order to accomplish the missions that we accomplish, it really is critical that we work together, we try to understand each other, and we strive to cooperate as best we can. We do that on the International Space Station with our different country partners, with our different commercial partners, and our perspective as we see the challenges that our nation faces and that the world faces is the need to cooperate and strive to understand so that we can overcome them. And so hopefully, as a crew on board the International Space Station with our Russian partners, we can be an example and maybe an inspiration for others to strive for that same understanding and cooperation.
It's been a few years since both of you were up on the station. Is it kind of a memory, instant muscle memory of what it's like, or does it feel different this time?
No, it doesn't feel too much different. In fact, I'm up here with one of the folks I flew with on my first flight when we did an assembly mission up here and brought the Japanese exposed facility. But I think the difference for both Bob and I now is we're here for an extended stay. With the shuttle flights, you were up here for roughly 10 to 12 days, and it was just an all-out sprint to complete all your tasks before you had to undock and go back to Earth on Space Shuttle. Here, we're going to be up here for potentially a few months, and so we're just trying to settle in. It's more of a marathon. We've got a lot on tap coming up, and so in that way, it does have a slightly different feel to it.
Now, a lot's been made of the fact that you were on the first rocket to lift off from American soil in an American rocket in 9 years. Does it feel like America is back in the space game?
I think for both Doug and I, it really does feel like we're back. The opportunity to fly off of 39 Alpha at the Kennedy Space Center, the same launch pad with just so much history from numerous programs, kind of from the beginning, if you will. It's just super exciting. And for astronauts like Doug and myself who flew shuttles and were a part of our astronaut office and a part of our nation's space program when we had the capability to launch our own crews into orbit, to assemble the space station, and having taken part in those missions, and then seeing classes of astronauts come after us who really have not had the experience of having a launch vehicle, that capability to get into orbit, to see the launches happen from your own soil down in Florida, is just an experience that I'm just really excited to see brought back. And it really does feel like it felt like coming home for both Doug and I to fly into Florida when we arrived on the NASA aircraft, got to fly over our launch pad. It was very much like the rich history that we were a part of with the shuttle program, and we just were excited to bring it back home again.
Now, remind us what the dinosaur is that we see floating around there on the space station. The dinosaur has special significance to both of you and your kids, right?
You bet. This was our zero-G indicator that we brought up on Crew Dragon. His name is Tremor, and he was picked by both of our sons to be the finalists to get to go fly with their daddies. So Tremor's going to hang out with us up here for the duration of the mission, and then we'll take him back home, hopefully in a few months.
Let me ask you, if I could, you mentioned, the young astronauts that have come on board. What is your message to young people today who dream of being astronauts, and specifically who can't graduate right now from high school or for college? You could combine your answer into a message to the graduates and to young people who want to be astronauts. But what's the message to young people who now are watching you and dreaming about going there?
For all the students who are out there with dreams to become astronauts or other dreams that are still in front of them, who have been affected by the pandemic, maybe a graduation was delayed, maybe a tournament that they were going to participate in from a sports perspective was delayed, is just because that event was postponed or didn't happen on schedule, that does not mean that your dream ends. That means it's an opportunity to persevere. It's an opportunity to continue that dream and find another way or an alternate way, or accept that maybe graduation isn't the requirement that it once was for accomplishing your next objective in the way that it was done by previous people. So I think with the situation that we've got, people will all have to adapt and overcome the challenge that is this pandemic, and move forward in spite of it, and continue to follow their dreams. I know that Doug and I had many challenges as we worked towards this mission, one of which was the pandemic that really started to affect us back in March of this year, impacted our training schedule, impacted which training events we could participate in, changed the way our quarantine leading up to flight was executed. The team worked together, tried to understand the problem, and was able to solve it to still accomplish the mission, which was our dream and their dreams of returning that human spaceflight to the Florida coast.
Well, guys, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day, and we wish you nothing but Godspeed and safety on the International Space Station.
Thank you, Tom. Appreciate it.
Station, this is Houston ACR. Thank you. That concludes our event as we count down to 20 continuous years of humans living and working on the International Space Station.
Thank you to all participants from ABC News and NBC News Station. We are now resuming operational audio communications.